Good morning and welcome to episode of the Ad Drop podcast on the Believe Sports Network. Rare is the time I get to sit back and discuss all things college sports with not just one, but two experts. With me, the managing editor of Last Word on College Football, Tony Siracusa, and Last Word on College Football writer, McMichael. Fellas, how are you doing this morning?
Going on, guys?
Good, good. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to being back.
Anytime. Now, correct to your first question. When you watched some parts of the draft last night, and we off the air, we mentioned a player like Bo Nix going
Yep.
to the Denver Broncos. Two-part question for you. What is it that makes teams reach for a quarterback? And two, do you think Bo is going to work out?
So two parts. I think it's almost paralysis by analysis by paralysis, or whatever that goes. I'm going to ask my editor to make sure that I get that right. But to me, it's like we get all of this information, we get all the data, we've got the college tapes, we get the combine, we get the pro days, and then it kind of seems like everything just goes out the window. I'm gonna say case in point. I'll get to Bo in just a second. The Atlanta Falcons. You just traded for Kirk Cousins, gave him $140 million, and then with the number 8 pick, you're taking Michael Penix. And reading Twitter this morning, Cousins and his team had no idea until they were about ready to draft that they were going to take Penix. And it's like, what's happening? So I don't know if it's that, if they just get nervous, they have to win the press conference rather than try to win games. But it goes out. Bo Nix, would have loved him round 2, round 3. I think he's going to be a guy who could have a long future there, maybe as a backup, maybe as a spot starter. But you're going to put him right into the fire. All that good that we saw in Oregon the last 2 years, we're going to get bad Bo Auburn version, I think, in Denver if we see him next.
Now, Tony, sticking along the same lines with Bo Nix, as someone who has covered the almost said Pac-10, the Pac-12. How much does the Oregon system and the way of playing mask deficiencies in their quarterbacks?
I think the old Oregon system probably did that a lot more than what you see currently. Dan Lanning being there, it's more of a pro style offense. I think that, when we make the reference to the Auburn Bo Nix, it's unfortunate because Auburn misused him tremendously. His success the last 2 years was really a byproduct of the coaching that he got from Lanning, being in the right offense. I hate the term system quarterback because realistically, everybody is a system quarterback. If you're succeeding, it has a large part to do with the fact that a coach has built a system around your skill set. That's what happened at Oregon. It's what didn't happen at Auburn for Nix. It's what did happen there. I agree that he was a real reach at number 12. I think T Biggs, when you and I were doing a lot of the shows on the different positions, looking ahead at the draft, I think I had put him somewhere mid-second round, and I think he would have been a good get there. But we saw something last night, which was just really insanity. Thursday night, first round of the draft, 6 quarterbacks taken. I mean,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? There were not 6 first. All right, let me preface it first by saying I'm never big at taking a quarterback number 1 or even number 3 or 4. I'm the guy who wants the offensive lineman. I'm the guy who wants to build the foundation because very few quarterbacks are ready to jump in right away. Um, Michael Penix, I think we've talked about it. I'm a huge Penix fan. I think his play in Washington showed his athletic ability, which is just freakish. An arm that can drill it in anywhere. But at number 8, and as Craig said, yeah, they just signed Kirk Cousins for like $100 kajillion. Um, what are you going to do with them? And I see, well, and this is true with Bo Nix at Denver, although not having a high end quarterback in front of them necessarily, but the same scenario. Well, look, they're rookies. They can sit for a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years. No, actually, they really cannot these are COVID era players. They're 24 years old already. Really, you're going to sit him until he's 28? I don't think you really can. Not when you used a first round pick on him. The idea that we're going to take a chance on him and he can sit a few years, not these guys. This is we are in the mixed era, the blending of the end of the COVID era college players, which also brought about, kind of a stoppage temporarily of players who were leaving after 3 years. Now, in the quarterback class for this year, we got a mix of that because we're starting to phase out the COVID era college players. But Penix and Nix, you can't, at their age already, you can't afford to sit them for 3 years.
Look at Penix, and like you said, he might be 27, 28 by the time he sees the field, and that is a lot of his prime. I mean, some of his prime is now gone. And if the Falcons didn't sign Kirk Cousins and they were going to go in with the intention of drafting Penix, I get it. Go in there, get his feet wet, but he's literally going to have to sit, and it's wild to watch. Now, Craig, as someone who covers the University of Georgia, the Las Vegas Raiders selected Brock Bowers, and you see folks upset. To me, I like the pick. When you look at the fact that they already have a tight end and the fact that they have now a dynamic tight end in Bowers, what does he bring to that offense?
To me, I wrote about it earlier this year in his draft preview, and I quite simply said he's a unicorn. I mean, what we saw Todd Monken do, what we saw Mike Bobo do, they put him all over the field. He had his hand on the ground. He took, he ran the ball a little bit. You put him in space. I mean, to me, like he's a matchup nightmare because you're putting him all over there. So to me, for Raiders fans, I know you may be upset, you may be disappointed. You already have that tight end, but you don't have Brock Bowers. And if he can stay healthy, there are some questions there. He had the high ankle sprain. That is a reality of that question. But you look at his athleticism, you look at his skill, you look at his ability to go and grab balls and just find that space. To me, he is going to be that unicorn, and that is going to be someone that the Raiders fans are going to be super excited about having. So I thought that was a good pick.
We had discussed a lot of quarterbacks earlier, and you mentioned we talked about Bo Nix, but JJ McCarthy at the 10 pick. I know that people have slotted high, but what am I missing? Like, I don't see him as a top 10 quarterback, like top 10 player. Am I wrong?
No, no, not at all. There was a lot of buzz about McCarthy after the combine, bearing in mind a lot of the high-end quarterbacks did not compete at the combine. They went and did the medical test and did the interviews and didn't do any of the on-field drills. So the competitive assessment or the comparative assessment rather for JJ McCarthy was a little skewed coming out of the combine. Look, I can't get past the fact, and of course, here's that phrase again: system quarterback. Jim Harbaugh's offense doesn't require a quarterback to put it up 40 times a game. It requires you to manage the offense. But yeah, I look at JJ McCarthy and I can't get past an entire fourth quarter of not one throw against Penn State. Was it 40 plays or whatever without a throw? And he's the number 10 player in the draft. Boy, that's but I look at Minnesota and I'm like, it's not, it's kind of mediocre pickings to begin with. Is JJ McCarthy going to go win the starting job in summer camp? Absolutely not. He's one of the players that is going to take a while to get into the NFL speed of the game because it is a lot faster than anything he faced at Michigan.
I have a question for you. So, like, as Tony knows, JJ McCarthy is not on my fan board. But like two thoughts. So, say Minnesota actually makes the hire of Jim Harbaugh last year rather than that. Is Harbaugh still taking JJ McCarthy at number 10? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I just and then here's the other question. On that fourth quarter scramble late in the Rose Bowl against Alabama, McCarthy doesn't make, it doesn't scramble away from the defender and makes that pass that's going to lead Michigan to that game, is he even a first round pick, or is he even going to the draft? Because Alabama wins that game, Alabama goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I just, it boggles my mind, and you can hear the frustration in my voice, but I just don't understand it. But those are the two big ones that my thoughts.
Well, I think the answer to your first question is clear in what Harbaugh did for the Chargers on Thursday night,
Yep.
which was a great pick for the Chargers, going and getting Joe Alt from Notre Dame. You've got to know that, everybody on that offense was, completely thrilled. Justin Herbert is jumping up and down to have that kind of protection in front of him. And when you hear Harbaugh's rationale, why didn't we go get weapons? And his answer was, we consider offensive linemen to be weapons.
Yep.
So no, if he winds up in Minnesota a year ago and is sitting there at this draft, he probably still takes Joe Alt just for a different, in a different uniform, or somebody like it. I don't think that he would have taken McCarthy at number 10.
Craig, to you, when we look at, that's when you mentioned these 6 quarterbacks selected in the first round, how many of them do you believe, just if you had to prognosticate, that will see a second contract with the team that drafted them?
Maybe Drake may, but our good friend Memphis Spence put out there yesterday, how many busts do you see? I don't see any of them in a situation where they're going to succeed. I see. I know it's not good radio, but I just see them all being bust. I think Chicago's setting up quarterbacks to fail. See Justin Fields with Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels is nice, but is he going to stop running because he got smoked a number of times last year, in the scramble? So, just to put it simply, I don't see any of them getting a second contract with them.
I'm going to disagree. I got to jump in and disagree on that, because while I've never been as high on him as others are, Caleb Williams has gotten more talent put around him than Justin Fields had in his entire brief Chicago career. I mean, they went out in the offseason, got Keenan Allen. They got Rome Odunze on Thursday, which T Biggs knows, man. I am high on Rome Odunze. I love that guy's athleticism. They had DJ Moore already. They could already run the ball. They have a real offense. And Justin Fields got to be sitting there going, are you kidding me? You couldn't have done any of this while I was there. So I think Caleb has a chance at that second contract. Drake May, I like Drake May a lot more 2 years ago when he was running Phil Longo's offense at North Carolina than I did last year. Jaden Daniels, I've been high on Jaden Daniels, and I like Jaden Daniels because I think he's got a lot. We're far from seeing his ceiling. He is a much different quarterback at LSU than he ever was at Arizona State. But I'm not sure I like Jaden Daniels with Washington. That pairing, not a good one. So, and I don't know. And again, with Penix, I mean, you're not going to sit a quarterback who's making $100 million. He's got his $100 million contract. Although, when I read into it, I think only 2 or maybe 3 years of that contract are guaranteed. So they can get off the hook at some point. Knicks, whatever. So I don't, I think 1 to 2 of them can make it with the second contract with their team.
I think 1 or 2 as well. When we come back from break, I want to delve more into the first round and kind of do a little jump around the NCAA and see what the landscape is like. But after a quick timeout, you're listening to the AdDrop podcast on the Believe Podcast Network. We are back with AdDrop Podcast. Terrence Biggs, Tony Siracusa, Craig McMichael, both of Last Word on College Football. Craig, to you, when we look at, if we take a spin towards college now, the transfer portal, and just how it appears as though just the emergence of the NIL agents, which is separate from the transfer portal, Which do you think will be more helpful to players in the long run, the portal or the NIL agent?
I think I'm going to be honest. I think it's the NIL agent because what I think we're going to see is I put out a stat last week in our chat. This is the fewest number of underclassmen you had. Now we have some COVID stuff here going on. The portal is going to be what the portal is going to be, but with these guys being able now to get paid, maybe instead of going around, maybe I'm going to be a third round pick, maybe a fourth or a fifth round pick. I'm going to stay that extra year. So they're going to get that extra experience. They're going to get that extra coaching. They're going to be a year older, so it's going to prepare them better for the NFL draft. Maybe also you're going to see something where they're going to level up in a program and they're going to say, I was a star at the MAC. I'm going to go to the Big Ten. I'm going to go to the SEC, and now my name's really going to be bright. So rather than that fifth round pick, maybe like it was a few years ago, maybe now I'm the second, or maybe I'm in that first round. So to me, it's NIL.
Tony, where would you fall for this?
I think that's right. And I would take it a couple of steps farther. I also think we're going to see guys who are even on the fringe of a fifth, sixth round, not even leaving where they would have before, or they used to, just because they were being told in their, by their family, their friends, whatever, yeah, you're a third round guy. Reality was they were a fifth or sixth round guy. They're not going to leave because they don't have to. They don't have to worry about the money as much. They're not getting rich in school, but they're making enough that their parents aren't having to send money, every couple of months and things like that. They don't have some of the same concerns the players did before. I also think because of that, we're going to see an elevation of the pro game because we're not seeing so many guys jump in before they're ready and NFL teams taking them on a flash, on a whim of a reputation of how good they could be. I think the same, and I realize this isn't the basketball show, but I think it's true of what's going to happen in the coming years for the NBA as well, because you're seeing a lot of players in college basketball sticking around for a third or fourth year, and it will only improve the game. So to bring it back to football, I think Craig's right. I think that this is something that the NIL is a bigger plus for the pro game because guys are going to stick around a little bit longer, take on that learning curve for a little bit longer, and are going to be more proven.
Just real quick, I throw it to Georgia. You look at Carson Beck. Carson Beck had a phenomenal year this year. He threw for over 300 yards. I think most years, before NIL, Carson Beck is gone.
Mhm.
I think there's no secret that the Classic City is probably taking care of Beck, and now he's going to be back for a second full year of starting. Probably going to take Georgia to the playoff, so he's going to be right up there next year in one of those top 5 picks. So I think that's a great, probably illustrates that example.
Also joining us is he covers UCF for Last Word on College Football. Our guy Andrew Gluchov. Drew, how are you, my man?
Good, good. Sorry for my tardiness. I'm on a review board for a scholarship, and we had some
Nice.
disagreements on who to present our scholarships to.
That's a hard job because it's just I don't know how you do it.
This year was the worst. We had the most applications that we've ever had, and we had some differences, so we were trying to hash it out.
There you go. Now, quick question to you. I was talking to Craig and Tony about this, and which do you think will be more important, the transfer portal for athletes or the NIL agents for athletes?
Well, I mean, we already know that what the transfer portal is. It's been around longer. It's become a little more mature. NIL is still very much in flux. It's not settled. Schools are trying to do more and more in-house. That creates the ability for oversight, more documentation, less McDonald's bag situations, but it's still in development. So I think NIL, I I think it's going to ultimately probably have a larger impact when it's all said and done, but we don't really know exactly what yet. But I mean, the portal is the portal. You know, there's little changes here and there, such as the tightening of the windows and stuff like that. But I mean, other than that, it generally is what it is. But we're still venturing into the unknown. Who knows what these court cases that could impact NIL are going to end up being. So I definitely have a lot more question marks as far as the impact of NIL, but we've already seen how big money talks.
I mean, we've been seeing little blips and pieces about a separate playoff system for, let's just say, the non-elite teams. Where do you see this? I guess two-part question. Do you see this becoming an eventuality? And two, should this be the norm as far as football? Like this would be more than a 2 or 3 year kind of a test period for it.
Well,
Yeah,
I
look,
hate.
we've seen a few things in that we've looked at, we hear all of these conversations about now the G5 schools will just have their own playoff system. And I get the compulsion to say that because they figure they're going to get the short shrift, certainly financially, in terms of who's getting paid out, how much money in an expanded playoff system. They're looking at there isn't a power 4 alignment of conferences. There's a power 2. And if you're not the SEC or the Big Ten, you're taking an other than share of pretty much everything. But I don't think it's a good idea. I don't, because you're just relegating yourself to the other than category. And I think you still want to be able to compete financially. You still want to, you're only going to get a couple teams in that 12-team playoff or 3 teams in that 14-team playoff or whatever. That's fine. It's a start because it's a financial start to bigger and better competition. Where are we going to go with, the Super League and all these other conversations? We're not going anywhere. Not until Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti say so. All due respect to the administrations of Syracuse and West Virginia, who've been at the forefront of having these discussions. When you see Greg Sankey, like he did, if it was this week or maybe it was late last week, say, yeah, I haven't had any discussions about it because it doesn't matter to me right now. Greg Sankey is the most powerful guy in college sports. And so until he and Petitti are on board, and it's going to be disproportionate, they're going to take care of their own. They are going to take care of theirs first. But any movement in the system is going to have their sign.
With that, Craig, same question to you. Do you think that it's a good idea? And if it does come about, is it going to be more than just a trial period?
So my thought is like, I agreed with Tony. I mentioned this the other day, talking on my podcast, but like the Big Ten and the SEC are already there. They're separating themselves, and it's going to be everyone else. There is no more, group of 5 or power 5. It's the big 2 and everyone else. And it does seem like we're getting to the point where those folks are going to have a championship, and then everyone else might have something. But at the end of the day, it comes down to who's going to pay for it. The reason why the SEC still doesn't have 9 games, even though they should, with all of those matchups, ESPN isn't paying for it. Fox is paying for the Big Ten to do that. Who's going to pay for this new championship for that other league? So to me, it's like until we get an influx of dollars or someone sees it to be as valuable, who's going to pay for the everyone else championship series? That's not going to be Prime. Are we going to go Peacock, or are we going to go Flow Sports, or whatever that may be? So to me, it's like we're gonna go with the 14-team playoff, and we're going to give everyone else a couple of bits. Big Ten and the SEC are going to have the majority of those spots, though.
Your thoughts?
Well, I've always been a proponent of the group of 5 schools. So for this, off the bat, I hate seeing them get the short end of the stick. They're always going to, but I hate seeing it. The idea of a playoff system only for the group of five is a terrible idea. It's what the power conferences want. They want them out. And that's why it's a terrible idea, because if they want it, it's probably bad for the others. You know, the dollars aren't there, the demand's not there. Their best bet is to hang around, is to hang on as much as they can. Now, I understand they're upset because you have this disproportionate increase in dollars. The CFP expanded has really expanded the amount of dollars in play, but only some breadcrumbs basically got thrown to the group of five schools versus what the increases in the other conference. Obviously, Big Ten, SEC take the lion's share. And yeah, it's not fair, but business is business. They don't. This isn't college football. These individual conferences. It's not like the NFL where they're under a singular banner. These guys are all separate. They're basically on this loose confederation that brings them together for the CFP. And other than that, it's every man for themselves. Now, I think that we've seen how that's killed rivalries and regionality and all that other stuff. But it's kind of like the growth of the WWE. Back in the 80s and earlier, you had regional territories. Well, that guy comes in, basically buys everything up, becomes national. The games change. Well, this is similar to that. Big Ten SEC is now national in size as opposed to regional like they used to be. It's no longer about regional territories, regional rivalries. It's about grabbing as many dollars as you can. Now, the whole thing with the Super League, what makes it more complicated is, and Craig kind of touched on this with the dollars. You basically have to line this up with the end of media contracts because no one's going to tear up what they have. So you have to line, the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the SEC. They're all, towards the end of the decade into the early 2030s is their window. The ACC is kind of in flux. Whether it's going to be 2026 or 2036, that's up for debate with the ESPN 10-year option. So you have to line it all up if you're trying to build something like a Super League. And as Tony said, Greg Sankey is not at all interested in this right now because there's no benefit for his league. None.
100%. But that's the thing is like, where's the benefit? You look at the properties that are available, and let's be honest. If you're the Big Ten and you're the SEC, all properties are available. Florida State and Clemson. I know Tony's been at the courthouse this week. Those properties are going to be available at some point. There are not 68 or 64 teams that are going to have that asset. Now, as a college football fan, that makes it very exclusive and also makes it, a bunch of big parts of the country, but they don't have those big pieces to say, hey, you know what, we have enough for 68. The only reason they want to be in 68 is because they've always been included. I think there's probably about maybe 5 or 6 more schools out there that might be of value. Everybody else is, I hate to say it, but it's going to be that everyone else, and it's going to be fighting for those scraps.
The other thing I would throw in there, Biggs, is your question about, is it a trial period or does it go longer? Everything is a trial period right now. The idea of something lasting 10, 12, 15, 20 years in college football is long gone. We live in a very fluid situation where, as Andrew pointed out, for the expansion or for the Super League, you do have to wait out what your TV contracts are because, they're the ones who are controlling the financing. But in terms of pretty much everything else, you already start looking for the out clauses in contracts and ways to change them. Look, in 2 to 3 years, we don't even know if the ACC is still going to be around in its current formation. I got to tell you, the odds aren't good. Craig made an offhanded reference to, me being in court. Look, I've got an entire file drawer in my desk now that is dedicated to the ACC suing Clemson, the ACC suing Florida State going to the state, appealing to the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, The lawsuit in Florida, and then yesterday, the nonsense from the attorney general in Florida, filing her complaint against the ACC. It's the status. So my point being, the status of everything is pretty fungible right now, pretty malleable.
Well,
Now,
let's take a quick step back on it, where this idea came from. The Knight Commission has come out flat out and said college football should be separate from the NCAA. And there's valid reasons, and there's valid reasons as it should, and that's where the start of this came. There's a lot that can be changed, but I think ultimately I don't think we'll see the Super League like that, but we're going to see some sort of detachment from the status quo. The status quo is not sustainable. It really is. The NIL part is not sustainable. There's stuff that's going to start drying up and falling apart, especially with the lack of stability in the regulations. So something's got to give. Now, the benefit of the Super League is you put everything under one banner. Now you have oversight. Now you have a standard of practice. So instead of having the state of Missouri saying that anyone that commits to a Missouri university can make NIL their senior year of high school, versus if you go out of state, you got to wait until you go to college. That gets taken off the board. You now have a standard of practice that all these schools can compete in, and I think
how does that hold
better.
up though? Like, but here's my question: you put those limits on there, and you put something out there. You put an association to oversee these colleges. It hasn't gone well for the NCAA and the Supreme Court. How does it go over for whatever this new Super League conference is called? Like again, if we're looking at the Missouri thing.
You need antitrust exemptions built in, and
Okay.
that's got to be part of the package. You don't get that, this has no legs. There's got to be at least a limited antitrust exemption built into it to be able to. Otherwise, like, the NCAA has no teeth. They can't subpoena. They have no antitrust protection, and so right now they're sitting ducks, and they're getting absolutely destroyed in court as a result. So I think. Go ahead, Tony.
Sorry, Drew. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
There is one thing that would help move that along, and everybody remembers reading the summaries of the Alston case with the NCAA, and Justice Kavanaugh calling the NCAA a cartel, which of course it is, and everybody stopped reading at that point. They didn't read the furtherance of his opinion, which was, if there is an authority to manage these types of things, it lies within the conferences, because the NCAA is basically a voluntary organization that you belong to. The conferences are contractual. You have a contractual agreement as a university with the conference you belong to. You can move, you can do other things, but you move from one contract to another. If you move college football away from the NCAA, which I agree will be done at some point within the next 2 to 3 years, then conferences will be the ones to have that kind of authority, that kind of sign-off ability. And as Drew points out, the need for antitrust protection will probably lie within them as they formulate this new group of whatever it's going to be called. And then you're going to need a commissioner. And, it's going to be Greg Sankey, but you're going to need a commissioner.
I want to ask a media question. So, like, okay, say we go to a Super League of 64. Everybody gets the same base number. If we bring in the Premier Lacrosse and we make relegation a thing, we do 2 or 3 tiers. I'm thinking now from a media perspective, media interest, and also fan interest. The relegation, the moving back and forth of all the controversy. We all like to watch, the rankings for the college football playoff. How much fun and how much more intrigue, how much more interest would that Super League get if, again, you look at Iowa and Auburn. Who's in the top 20? Who's 22 to 23? Like there's controversy there. So as we think about leagues, folks moving up and down, does that help move the needle and maybe draw in more interest so that we can have multi-Division I championship playoffs?
Well, something to keep in mind too is not just on the media side, but on the school side. If you're going a promotion relegation and that changes your financial status, how do you budget that on a year-to-year basis?
So that's my thought again, because we're in the land of fairy tales and we can make it up. Everybody's guaranteed that certain number, and then when you're in the next tier up, you get X number of $1 million more, and then that top tier is X number of $1 million more. And with the idea, again, you're basing on that, and I also know it's not reality, but that's my thought, is everyone has that minimum expectation, and then based on where you're at in that relegation system, that's how much more dollars you're getting and things like that.
It's fun and entertaining, and would certainly be, provide some games where the fan base is like, "Ooh, we got to win this," or we're in the lower tier of whatever. You're going to get some pushback from some universities who don't have the ability to compete at that level. They're going to be in the lower relegation from here to eternity, because while they're guaranteed this, and we'll just make up a number, they're guaranteed they're 30 million a year, and that's fine. They don't have the boosters, they don't have the critical mass of people kicking in more money to their school in order to compete with the ones who are up at this other level. There's always going to be a tier of other than the also rans. Vanderbilt is always going to be Vanderbilt.
Yep.
Georgia Tech will always be
is it
Georgia
always
Tech.
there,
And so their thing is, well, okay, maybe we catch fire one year,
Yeah.
and all the wind is blowing in our favor for one year, but 9 out of the last 10 we're in the lower tier, and this sucks.
But I mean, are we there already? I mean, Vanderbilt's been in the basement. They're doing construction to start a football season. Or is it because they're guaranteed the SEC ransom that it's okay?
Yeah, and so they're getting SEC money that it's okay, and
that's fine. No, I mean,
this is what we UCF people have griped about, have seen for a long time, where we're programs that are there because they're older and we're in the right place at the right time, not because they actually earned it. There's no earning this stuff from Vanderbilt. They just happen to be old enough and in the Southern Conference with a bunch of others when they created the SEC. You take a newer program like a UCF or one that rose up like a Boise State, and they've earned a lot more than a lot of these lower rung power conference schools, and they didn't get sniffed at. The only reason why UCF got into Big 12 is just because they were in the right place at the right time. They got lucky. They were lucky that Texas and Oklahoma left. Otherwise, they weren't getting in. They tried that whole dog and pony show in 2016, and it went nowhere. So you've got schools that have earned from their on-field results. San Diego State, Fresno State, schools like that, versus a Boston College, a Vanderbilt, schools that are there because of pedigree and history, but they've done so little over the last 20 plus years. It's like, why are you still here? And it's because of the flawed system. Yet in the Super League, they're permanent. They can't be relegated.
For me, it is. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
To Drew's point about Vanderbilt, yeah, they were kind of the first person on the street who built a house, and now they built a nice neighborhood around that house, and they're gonna stay. Wendy Winterstein, that might be the name that you three might not understand, but she is might not who it is. She's the president of Iowa State. The state of Iowa has decided to eliminate all DEI programs completely. All the 3 state schools, which is Iowa, Iowa State, and UNI, which is Northern Iowa. This is what Wendy Winterstein said. She's, like I said, the president of Iowa State. So one of the first things we did to establish learning communities so that a young white man from rural Iowa could become and be in a learning community and find a place where they belong. Tony, first question is to you. If you are an opposing school outside the state of Iowa, do you just play this for recruits over and over and over?
Love how you came to me first.
He was worried what
Everyone
I
else
was
is
going to
having
say. He was worried.
everyone else is
He
having
knew
a
he
good
set the
laugh
tone.
because yeah, sure, I don't have an opinion on this. First, I didn't realize that white kids from rural Iowa were having a hard time finding their place in the world there. That was news to me. So thank you, Wendy, for pointing that out. But look, football is dominated by African American athletes, basketball by Black athletes. You know, yeah, if I'm a Big 12 school, I am playing that on a loop over and over and over. I don't care if I have to negative recruit against Iowa State. Really, I'm not. I'm just telling you what they said. I'm not saying don't go there. I'm just saying, hey, just so you know, here's who and what they are. Bet your bottom I'm using that over and over again as much as needed. I mean, man, talk about stepping in it.
Greg, same question to you. If you are, let's say you are going to go and recruit, and one of your prospects said, "Well, I'm looking at Iowa." Just sit them down on your phone and just play it on a loop. And how awful does Iowa State, not just Iowa State, but the state of Iowa, knowing that
Right.
this is one of their big three school presidents, literally said what people of a certain mindset said what they believe is the quiet part out loud.
And they're supposed to set the tone for our elections. But anyway, but like, I don't know, maybe I'm trying to be. It is just absolutely mind-boggling and frustrating. We go to college as a place to learn about these new experiences. We have a very interesting time in our lives. We are politically divided. We have lots of emotions going in there. Universities are supposed to be that space where we can have those conversations. And to think that they just magically disappear, I'm playing it. I'm just going to say maybe there's a reason Caden Proctor went back to Alabama more than just NIL dollars, because that's just, I'm sorry, I'm just very frustrated, and I don't want to say something that I'll get in trouble for. So that's just wrong. It's just wrong. Yes, I'm going to negatively recruit with it.
Very same question to you. When you look at that and being someone who covers UCF, if you have a football recruit say, you know what, I'm looking at Iowa too. Even before you say anything, you sit them down with like a giant screen and you just play this loop over and over again. What does it speak to the boldness of schools in a state that, like a term, is a flyover state that have the temerity to say this?
Here's the problem. I live in Florida. This school's in Florida. Florida already eliminated all their DEI programs. And the NAACP has flat out told African American athletes, think twice before going to a Florida school. So they saying the quiet part out loud, man, we've been living that over here for the past year plus. I mean, here's the truth. In Iowa State, stepping in is the right term. They're a G5 in disguise. They look like a P5. That's a G5 school. That's another example of school that doesn't belong in a super league as a permanent member. They belong with the Toledos of the world. But I mean,
they got Toledo's old coach.
Yeah, seriously. But seriously, when you give media bites, I mean, it's one thing to take the governor of Florida and play that on repeat, because at least he's a little bit separate from the school itself. But for an administrator of the school itself to put that in, permanently into the media world, I mean, you really did your school a disservice. We all know how the population demographic distribution is across the country. We know what the stereotypes are. We don't need to accentuate them. What we need to do is understand them and realize that dynamics are changing. My mom was doing a thesis paper in school not some years ago. We were talking about it, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to talk about how the melting pot of America." I go, "It's not a melting pot. It's a fruit salad. You've got the big bowl of the country." And we use South Florida as an example because we were living down in Doral. You got the area, and you have a bunch of different cultures in it, but they're all keeping to themselves. And this adds to that. Different cities and different demographics are now no longer integrating like they did 100 years ago. We're keeping to ourselves because we built barriers, and this only builds another barrier against being the melting pot that made, for lack of a better term, made America great. That was one of the best things about our country is we were a mix of different cultures that took little pieces here, little pieces here, and created something even better. And now we're walling ourselves off, one culture after another, and being the dominant culture, as far as population distribution, kind of like being the world superpower. You almost have a responsibility to tear down the walls, to make where you are a place people want to be proud of and grow in and be successful. That's part of the American dream is the land of opportunity. Well, if you're building walls, you're taking opportunities away. Yeah, sure, you don't have to give special consideration, but don't sabotage the progress of 200 plus years of growth for sound bites. It's not worth it.
I want to make a point. I don't want to. I know you got other topics, and I don't want to go on too long. But I want to extend on something that Craig and Drew both said in their own separate ways. One, since everybody is listening to this and not watching this, let's be clear. We got three white media guys talking to a black host who we all revere as a great media person and someone who has busted their butt to do what he did in this world. All right, but we're also cognizant of who and what we are and what our backgrounds are and where they came from. All right, so I grew up in a town of only 13,000 people. That when I graduated high school in 1983, there was one black family in the entire town, maybe a couple of Hispanic families. Anyone old enough to remember the old TV show Sanford and Son knows that Red Fox used to make fun of my hometown, El Segundo, where the sewer meets the sea. And it was because he was stopped by police on his way to the airport and told to go around the city. He wasn't welcome to drive through it, and therefore it became a punchline. Now, I grew it by the time I got out of high school, I couldn't get out of there fast enough because I realized there was a whole big world out there that I was missing out on. And when I went to a college that's undergrad population was 3 times the size of the entire city in which I grew up, and I saw this diversity, I was amazed and enthralled and couldn't get enough of it. And I live my life like that as a result. And so to see a university, as Craig talked about, a place where we're supposed to expand our horizons, doing what Drew talked about, walling itself off from the rest of reality is just it's unconscionable. I mean, we're sitting here talking about sports and what do we use it for recruiting, and of course we would, but just in the bigger picture, it's completely unconscionable.
Funny, like being in media and working in media, for me, I've had to learn how to separate feeling and fandom from our job. This is what we do.
Sure, we all do.
Yep.
This is our thing. This is, and yet when I look at this, I take it personally because I'm like, wait a minute. A year ago, I watched Iowa and Wisconsin play, and the only touchdown was a 86-yard touchdown run by an Iowa running back who was black. But that just blows my mind. And looking more into the Iowa situation, their name of the Iowa State football stadium is Jack Trice. Jack Trice is a beloved figure in Iowa, where he's a former player he had what's called a roadblock on the field where he died of internal injuries, even though he had to kind of be driven off the field. And when I think of Jack Trice and I think of what is done, this is a picture of Jack Trice.
Right.
And for me, it's like, wait a minute, you are telling people from diverse backgrounds, no, 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 we don't care about that. But yet the name that adorns your stadium, that when you look at Iowa football, when you look at Iowa basketball, when you look at Iowa State football and basketball, black athletes, not just black athletes, but Latino athletes, athletes of different faiths, athletes of different cultures have made those schools tons of money. Kirk Ferentz is able to underachieve based on the fact that he has great players. He cashes his checks on the backs of players that come from places not like him. And it's sad to watch. And I want to see if there's a reaction from the schools, and especially from the coaches, because yeah, the recruiting thing is not exactly, when you look at the big picture, the biggest thing, but I'm gonna look at players and I'm gonna look at to see if they know what they're actually being thought about. Instead of they'll they'll be prized for the athletic talent, and I get that. But if you're a player, I'll be honest, if you're looking at Iowa and you're looking at what's what, it would take some explaining to kind of, if I were to play it, to get me there. Now, speaking of explaining, our last topic is actually no, yes. We have the Heisman Trust has decided to return the Heisman Trophy to Reggie Bush after so many years. My question, it has an NCAA twist to it. SMU, who basically did the same thing, basically got in trouble for doing what people do now. Unfortunately, they did it 40 years ago. Same things. If you're SMU, do you sue the NCAA to kind of either get a little bit of that money back, and two, to get some sort of acknowledgement of the pain that program suffered? Their program has never been the same. They have returned to a level, but when they left, they were up here. Now they're like right here still, and they had to fight for decades to get here, Tony.
Yeah, I think you probably could. I don't know how much money you'd get out of it, because quantifying what you lost over 3 decades is going to be really difficult, because most of it is built in the hypothetical. Um, Ironically enough, as you bring the two schools into the conversation, while USC was found to have a lack of institutional control, they weren't given the death penalty because of what happened to SMU. The NCAA became horrified. It was meant to be a 2-year ban and turned into a 30-year penalty because the school wasn't the same. And do you want an apology from the NCAA? Yeah, sure, fine. And should the NCAA apologize? You know what? The rules were the rules back then. You broke what were the rules back then, and the fact that they're not the rules anymore has to weigh into this. Look, I realize I'm one of like 3 people in the entire country who doesn't want to hear about Reggie Bush getting his Heisman back, because the fact is that rules he broke back then are still rules now. His parents got the house rent free from Mike Ornstein, an NFL marketing agent, in exchange for Reggie agreeing to sign with Ornstein when he went to the NFL. That was illegal then, it's illegal now. So whatever. It was a guilt trip. It was, based upon people saying, hey, Reggie got this money, but now everybody gets money. Look, whatever. The NCAA was allowed to sit. Ornstein wound up suing Reggie Bush. The case of Ornstein v. Bush, and the NCAA was allowed by the judge to sit in on the depositions because Bush had gone to the NFL and was out of the jurisdiction of the NCAA. So the judge gave them a front row seat to the depositions. So it's not like it was a hypothetical. The NCAA knew all the details. Eventually, during the settlement, when Reggie paid Ornstein out hundreds of thousands of dollars, everything about the case was then sealed. So back to your original question, should SMU do something? Their options for doing anything are limited at best.
Limited at
Right.
best, but they have, but limited at best. But there is a financial argument they can make. and SMU is still doing this now because they paid their way into the ACC and they're getting no money. If I'm the SMU Pony Express, I'm looking at what Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech have made from the Big 12, or yeah, from the Big 12, and I'm also looking at what has Texas A&M and Arkansas made since being in the SEC. Because if we don't get the death penalty, does SMU get the invite over one of those schools into one of those regions? So if you want to quantify it, it's good. Now it's gonna make better for media, more sensation, and it's probably more on three than anything else. But like, there's how you quantify it. Is should they've gotten those invites over some of those other schools, and if they could look at TCU.
Let me give you a counter argument on that, though. You say,
go ahead.
Granted, TCU, it took them a while to get there. They were
100%.
excited. The counter argument is, what about Houston? Look at where Houston went. You can make the argument SMU could have gone the same direction Houston did.
Yep.
Remember the one reason why Baylor and Tech got in the Big 12 was because of Texas politicians.
Yep.
That
but
I don't know if SMU, whether they didn't get shut down or not, because they were terrible before that too. They were a terrible program before the Pony Express started. So it's not like they had a history of success to fall back on.
But I'm sure SMU would say, "Don't let facts ruin a good story."
Well, of course not. It's all about creating the narrative. But
right. Yeah, no, I totally get it. But again, if I'm SMU, that's the way I'm doing. I'm not going to talk about Houston. I'm not.
No, that's what's going to get knocked against them. That's the counter argument against them. So here's the other question, though: does this open Pandora's box for, say, Ohio State 2010, who did something basically that does fall into the NIL landscape? And they played their game. The game result happened, and then it was taken away. It's different than fighting a hypothetical of what is this worse? What would have happened? That's hard to argue. But in the case of Ohio State in 2010, they played the bowl game, they won their bowl game, and then they were ruled that they had to forfeit the bowl game. Can they make an argument to get that game back because it actually happened?
It's one of those things that definitely bears watching, because I look at it and I just remember being a little kid, and SMU was, I'm old enough to remember where SMU was the program for those couple of years from like 80 to like 83 was just like that 4-year period. They just, every Saturday you had Keith Jackson somewhere in Dallas, or Brent Musburger in his hair somewhere in Dallas, just watching SMU run people. They ran Texas out of Texas Stadium countless times, and just to see the school just kind of barely come back into national consciousness is weird. I thought that would be the last topic. This is the last topic, and I'm gonna start with Tony. When you look at Charlie Baker, you look at the fact that he is the head of the NCAA, and you look at how the dynamic has shifted from, like I said, being a kid. The NCAA used to be the end all be all of college sports, ran everything. Just now it just seems like he, instead of telling a lot of these football conferences what to do, they have to work kind of hand in hand, and kind of, it's like a hand, like you mentioned, it's a handshake deal that can change from year to year. How do you think he has to kind of know that fact that the biggest money making sport is slowly walking away from him?
I think that's why he took the job. I think that's why you hire somebody like Charlie Baker, who was a 2-term Republican governor of a very blue state with a 60% approval rating. That's why you bring someone like him in. He came in with his eyes open about what was happening with football. It's why he has worked with, however it is that you can work with Congress in trying to shape the landscape, whether it's NIL, whether it's antitrust protection, whether it's those things, because he's also aware that college football will pull away from the NCAA at some point. But let's be clear, college football is the big money maker, but not for the NCAA. The conferences control the TV contracts. The playoff committee controls the postseason. the moneymaker for the NCAA is March Madness. And it's the College Baseball World Series and the Softball World Series. And the conferences to this point have said that if football pulls away, they want nothing to do with the other stuff in terms of running it. Greg Sankey is not looking to run March Madness.
Yep.
It is too much to do with all the postseason stuff that the NCAA currently does, that the conferences in their current existence, they don't want to run those. They'll move football and leave the rest back to the NCAA. And so, which ironically enough, years from now, we'll probably get another realignment where schools are participating against other schools in their actual region of the country. But that's for another conversation with this group 2 years from now. But that's why you hire somebody like Charlie Baker, because he's got the situational awareness, the ties with Congress, the big picture scope that the past 3 or 4 NCAA presidents lack.
Greg, same question to you. If you're Charlie Baker, how do you kind of deal with the fact that football, as Tony mentioned, is not your biggest money maker, basketball isn't, but football probably is your most popular. I mean, it's just slowly walking away. It's slowly walking the door as you walk in.
To me, I think Baker comes in. He's a steward. He's seeing it. He knows the end's in sight, right? Unlike what happened with the Pac-12 over the last couple of years, he knows what's going to happen. I feel like Mark Emmert was always in the news and he was always combative, right? Like he was always fighting. Baker, you know, when you hear from him, it's not, he's not poking anybody. He's not poking the bear. He understands. He's a realist. Yes, we're going to give that up. If he's smart, he's going to figure out, okay, Greg, you're going to get this new football thing. What can I get? Maybe, and this goes back full circle to our earlier conversation. Is there maybe a group of 5 that we can have as some sort of NCAA championship where this power league goes off and does something else? But to me, Baker's going to be that politician. He knows what's going to happen, but he's going to set it up to where the NCAA is not going to be on fire. The NCAA is still going to be there and still going to be intact even after the Super League leaves.
True.
Well, I mean, we all know why Baker was hired. He's a politician, and you're seeing that. You know, he, as Craig says, he's not combative publicly. He knows how to schmooze and work to, you know, work the background scene. And that's why he was hired, is because the NCAA knew they needed that. We know FBS football is separating itself from the NCAA. There's too many things that support it. You know, we were talking about the Night Commission earlier. Too many things support the separation. We know that the NCAA serves as the clearinghouse. They certify the bowl games. But they don't do a whole lot of other stuff with FBS football. Just a few things that, you know, that can easily be traded off or you know, find some sort of middle ground. So I don't think a separation is going to be all that difficult. You know, they already have a Division I championship. It's called FCS. If you look online, what's the Division I NCAA champion? You're going to get, you know, a North Dakota State, a South Dakota State, whoever wins FCS that particular year. So, I mean, they already have something. So, I mean, I don't think all that much is going to change other than stuff officially. You know, they don't make any money off FBS football at all. They don't make a dime on that stuff. In fact, they may save money by not having to worry about some of these other things that they do. If they can create something that there's a college football commissioner on the FBS level that can manage all that, manage the certification of bowl games, because I'm pretty sure the bowl system will exist outside of your basic playoff. I think they'll have other games still there. I don't think the bowl system's going away. You know, I think we found kind of a happy medium between the two. But I think the NCAA may ultimately benefit from this. Plus, when something goes wrong, oh, it's the NCAA's fault. The NCAA doesn't have anything to do with it. They're just there on paper, just as like an also then. Now, if you can make a full cut, they can save some face, some protection. So when something goes wrong, and it will go wrong, you have someone new to blame, and it won't be the NCAA.
I am smarter. Our listeners are smarter. Andrew Gluchov, Tony Siracusa, Craig McMichael, all from Last Word on College Football. Fellas, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Ad Drop Podcast.
Glad to do it. Be well.